Advisory Design Panel meeting held on Thursday, May the 16th. Firstly, welcome to the Squamish Nation Traditional Territory. The first item is the adoption of the agenda, and staff recommendations is that May the 16th, 2024 Advisory Design Panel agenda be adopted. Can I have a member of the panel motion to have the agenda adopted? Sarah, one, and Charles, second. Thank you. The next item is the committee minutes, the advisory design panel minutes of February. Oh, sorry, that's not right. That's business. The first item of business is ADU design contest update from Matt Gunn, who's a planner at the District of Squamish. I'm just going to pass the mic over to him.
Thank you so much, Luke. My name is Matt Gunn, planner for the District of Squamish. I've been asked to keep this fairly short because of the items that are following on the agenda. So this isn't going to be an opportunity for discussion or questions. I did send out everything that I'm going to be discussing via email to the ADP members. So I'm just going to go over that. If there are questions that people want to discuss, I ask that you email me afterwards and I'll follow up and share all the responses with everyone on ADP. This is in relation to the accessory ADU, accessory dwelling unit competition that we're running right now. And we met with ADP at the outset. ADP will be judging the contest entries. We've had a fair bit of interest in the contest. We've had registration for over 80 entries to be submitted. We'll see what actually comes through. They're in 3 categories: carriage house with a 2-meter FCL, elevated cottage with 1-meter FCL, and front yard ADU. Because there's quite a significant number of entries expected, I've tried to come up with a bit of a system for the judging to minimize the amount of time we have to battle through the thinking together. And what I've come up with is a hope that we can try and get a short list created by ADP prior to the meeting next month when we actually judge the entries. So I just wanted to run over what's going to happen between now and next month. The next week, the submissions are all coming in. We're going to review them internally. Our plan checkers are going to make sure they comply with zoning and building code requirements. And then I'm going to send them on June 6th. I'll send the submissions to all of ADP using probably a sync site with the entries categorized by the 3 different categories. And what I'd ask that ADP do at that point is to go through the entries and select 4 from each category that they'd recommend getting moved forward to the short list. And then I'm going to go through all those and figure out which ones have the most votes to be moved forward to the short list, and actually only move 4 from each category forward for discussion. That would mean we'd have 12 entries that we'd have to discuss as a group. And the intention would be to get those, use the 2 hours to discuss those as a group. We could take about 10 minutes per design and talk about things that ADP could share things they like if they have things that they want to talk about with those designs. And then the actual judging would occur following the meeting. Individually, ADP members would rank the entries against 5 criteria that are outlined in the design brief. Get a score out of 20 for each of the categories, jot it down on the paper for each of the 12 entries, send them to me, and then I'll average out the scores, and that's how the winners will be selected. So I'm trying to really minimize going through 80 as a group. I think that would be laborious and too challenging, not practical. So the big ask from ADP is that on June 6th, when you get the email with all of the submissions, all 80 if they do get submitted, it's going to be a bit of work, but in the week following that, I would ask that people go through and pick 4 from each category that they want to recommend for moving to shortlist. That's my big ask for you guys now. And then at the following meeting, we'll discuss, and then after you can rank. So to keep to my 5 minutes, I think I'm getting close to the end of what I wanted to say. That's about it, but I'm happy to discuss more over email. The email I send you has all of the information. Feel free to respond, ask me any questions. And if you have any concerns about the process that I'm outlining, this is just my best guess at how to manage this. If you don't think this is the best way to do it, or you want to try and suggest some alternatives, please make a recommendation, and then I can through that email chain, sort out how to move forward. That's it for me, under 5 minutes, and I'll let you guys move on.
Thank you very much, Matt. So yeah, just to clarify again, any questions, send them to Matt and he'll be able to respond to them after this meeting. The next item on the agenda, I'll move forwards, would be development permit number DP 000617, which is 2027 Finch Drive, phases 3 and 4. I'll take this opportunity to recuse myself from the project as I am employed by the architect who's the prime consultant on this project. We're just getting set up here, but if the proponent can keep their presentation to 10 minutes, that'd be great. And after that, we'll move to a round of questions and comments. Just give me 2 minutes to set up.
Sorry, do we not need to approve the minutes?
I believe, oh, sorry, we adopted the agenda, didn't we? We didn't get the minutes. My apologies. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, we'll be advisory design panel minutes dated February the 15th to be adopted. Thanks. If I can get a vote on that.
Sorry, I just had, there's one line on here that I don't understand, and so I'm hoping that somebody else can maybe.
Okay, yes, Sarah, can you
yeah,
identify the line?
Yeah, the final, it's encourage adaptable units, that they are across the units that are available. I don't understand what it's supposed to say, and I can't recall the conversation, so I just wondered if anybody else could clarify that.
Okay, myself wasn't at the meeting. Was anyone else present today at the meeting that can clarify for Sarah?
If I recall, the intent of that is to ensure that there are adaptable units of all of the same types that are available in the project at large. That's what they mean by across there is that the adaptable should just all be one bedrooms, right?
Unit type, okay. So we should add the term unit types.
Yeah, I think that would make it clear.
Would that clarify that enough for you, Sarah?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I entirely agree with it, but sure.
Charles, how about you? Would that make sense to you? Unfortunately, I wasn't at the meeting, so I cannot comment on this line.
I think for the purposes of the panel's recommendation, as long as the intent of that is clarified, then it should be.
Sorry, Charles, your microphone is really quiet and I'm struggling to hear you. Can you try and make it louder for us?
Yep.
Thank you.
Here's it. Brings it up. Is that better? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it's much better. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, I think no, I as long as the intent of that sentence is clarified, that should be sufficient for the purposes of this of the minutes there.
Yeah, I'm just not sure that we actually, that was agreed upon, that they should all be the same type of unit.
No, that's what we're saying is that they should not. They should be
Oh, that they
across
should
all
not.
types of units. That they
Across
should,
all types of units,
there
okay.
should be there
Okay.
should be adaptables of all the different types that are in the project.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So they should be across all types of units that are available.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Carly, would it be
That's
okay
great.
to amend the
Thank you.
minutes to? Thank you. Okay, can someone move for that? Thank you, Sarah. And seconded, Charles, thank you. Charles, as vice chair for the ADP, would you be able to take over the development permit for this project, please?
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you, Charles.
I believe we're beginning with a presentation by the district staff.
That's correct, yeah.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ADP. My name's Bryan Daly. I'm a planner here, and today we will be looking at development permit number 617, located at 2027 Finch Drive. 2027 Finch Drive is at the easternmost end of Finch Drive at the top of a steep hillside. This development permit is considering two apartment buildings named AP3 and AP4. One has 63 units, AP3. The other has 62 units, AP4. They're both accessed off of a strata road off of the end of Finch Drive. Staff are seeking comments from ADP on the form and character of the buildings and the landscaping as they pertain to the DPA3 guidelines. The proposal meets the CD 101 zoning. With that, I will pass it over to the project architect, and I'm happy to take any questions related to zoning following the presentation. And I'm just going to run and try and help the landscape architect get on the call. I am on the call, so don't worry about that. Much appreciated. Can everyone hear and see me?
Yes, we can.
Good afternoon. My name is William Duncan. I'm a design architect from Stark, and I'm here to present the ADP for AP3 and 4 of Finch Drive development. On the first screen, you can see a 3D rendered perspective of both units coming down from the southern face of Finch Drive. To the left is AP4 and to the right is AP3. Go on to the next slide. Our initial concept for this building was to take into account the surrounding vernacular of Squamish through the hillsides and the colour that changes throughout the seasons. As you can see, we've minimised our tones down to kind of three distinctive ranges, which is the green of the trees, the dark greys of the hillsides around, and then the warm earth tones and timber tones of the forests around. These are some precedents that we used as a way to slowly come to terms with a good design for the area. You can see throughout that we're trying to create a development that steps with the landscape and is responsive and respectful to the local area. As you can see, it's part of a larger development, which I'm assuming quite a few people already know about. So there is already a few parts that are under construction. Phases 1 and phase 2 will be coming into construction later on. The two buildings that we're talking about are AP3 and 4, which are to the right hand of the page, and they look down the entire development and sit hard up against a large hill beyond. Within this image, which might not be so clear, but this is talking about the circulation throughout the entire site and how the whole site connects together and how we are trying to address accessibility throughout as much as possible. And then through to the form and mass and how we came to the buildings that you will see. So we initially started with two large forms that were masses, and then we decided that we needed to break them up so they were broken by the vertical axes and accessibility of the buildings, which slowly broke down this large form. And then further to this design, we started playing with material tones, which also then slowly started returning it back to its surrounding. And then once it started connecting to the site, we started breaking the form vertically and horizontally so that it started playing with the hillscape around. I'm going to start with AP3 for the more detailed images and then go on to AP4. So this is a site plan of AP3. As you can see, following up the left side of the page and then circling around is Finch Drive, which then you follow down Solar Way, which is a strata road. There is one access in and out of the parkades, and this was decided so that there would be minimal interference with the circulation of public around. As you can see, the parkades have two access points vertically with lifts and stairs, and we've located our accessible parks as close as possible to these circulation for ease of access. We have also got two types of parking, which is the small car parks and then regular size. The second level of parkade, or the parkade 1, is the next level up, which is still embedded in the ground, but then does come out to the northern face, as you can see, where the amenity is. The amenity is located close to a vertical circulation as well for, once again, ease of access, and also it connects directly to a strata park, which is to the bottom left of the page. And once again, that was so that there would be an ease of connecting the entire building together. On level 1, it is still partially embedded to the right of the page, and this is where we have the beginnings of apartment blocks. We have 5 typologies or unit types in this building, and then obviously to the right you can see there are storage lockers and bike parks. For the residents, there is 1 storage locker per per unit, and then there is 2 bike parks per unit, 1 in the unit and 1 in the bike parks bike room. Then the next few levels are just the units, as you can see, along with the lobby and commercial space to the south of the building. This is once again designed with street-facing consciousness involved. It has a level entry, once again, to make the ease of entering into the building a lot easier and also visually appealing. And then we've also started playing with units that are in connection with the ground to have openings out onto the landscape to create a more human scale. We'll just quickly go through these levels. It's the same again, but as you can see, as we move up, the building steps away, and that's once again to respond to the surrounding, but also to try and minimize shading of properties that are surrounding it. These are some sections that are kind of indicating how it is sitting within the ground and how the ground moves up the building and along with the building moving as well. Here's a section just cutting through on the crossways of it. A quick note, the building, so to the left of this building is a set of duplexes, and they are located 55 feet away from the building, and we've tried to keep the building as far away as possible to minimize shading from them. And just another view again. And then this is just the elevations indicating the materiality and the breaking of the facade to create it to create more interest and to remove the monotonous of a flat face. And once again, here it is just showing the other side. And then just some nice renders kind of indicating the engagement of how the building would be used on the site with people and landscaping, and just how it sits into the surrounding quite nicely. And then this will be a view from the Finch Drive as you circle up around that corner. So now we're on to AP4. AP4 is very similar to AP3, and they speak to each other really well. This site is once again on a steep again. The entry to the parkade, there are 2 entries on this building, and that is just due to the nature of the building. There's an entry where my mouse is now, which shows down, and then there's another one that goes in flat and then heads up. So the lower parkade, once again, a collection of different types of parking with accessible parking as close as possible to the vertical circulation. Level 1 of the parkade shows, once again, the same context, but this one has a lot more functionality with bike storage and the garbage room, etc. and then up to the next level, which is where the entry comes in. So it's a similar system to AP3, where it's a level entry with landscaping around to engage people to enter in and make it very obvious where the entry is. The amenity space comes off this entry foyer along with the vertical accessible routes, and the amenity space then spills out onto an outdoor area with a little bit of cover from balconies above. And then as we move up, the unit types are the same as AP3, ever so slightly different size, but once again, same again. And then we have storage units that are built into the back of the hill, and then the building steps back, as so does AP3, to once again respond to the site. This one has a bit more of a slope in the site, and so therefore there is more of the building underground, which I'll show you in the sections. As you can see, from level 3 down to level 1. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. And then, apologies for this. And then once again, materials are the same as AP3, so they speak to each other, and the materials actually are all similar colors and textures from the entire development. So we're trying to create a really cohesive feel to the space. And then here's some more renders, as you can see, very similar to AP3. Once again, very responsive to the site and its surroundings, and just, yeah, working together. But yeah, thank you very much. I think that's all from architecture.
Great. Sorry, were we going to get a presentation from landscape or?
Yes. Now, Brian, were you going to share the presentation?
Yeah, I can do that.
That would be fantastic. Can everyone hear me okay? Good. Thanks.
My apologies. I did not save this properly. I'll be back in 2 minutes.
Okay.
Unless you have it and
I
you
have
can
to
share your
quit and
screen,
restart,
you can just
apparently.
drive yourself.
I could. I'll try quitting and restarting, because that's what it's asking me to do to share. So I apologize for the technical.
Hold on, you should be able to now.
Yeah? Okay. I think it was my computer, though. Okay. Okay. I'm back. Let's try this again. Okay, can everyone see my screen now?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So thanks for doing the tour of the overall site. And as was mentioned, it's quite a challenge from a grading standpoint, but we tried to make the best of it. We do have a multi-use path that is around the edge of the site, and then it drops down a fair amount on Solar Way. But we look at areas where we can come into the building level where we do. So at the far low end of the site, we have an area that can bring bikes in, but it also can act as the accessible route to this main amenity area here. Along the apron, we're looking at activating it and having a nice area for the amenity to spill out into, which also spills out into a bit of a picnic area with a lawn that would overlook a play area. And we're looking at utilizing some of the natural character of the site and also the surroundings to really have a natural feeling to the base of the building. There's a walkway that comes through, and there are ramps to reconcile the grade from one end to the other, so that you really can walk from one end all the way to the other without barriers. Where the ground level units meet, we're looking at having just little access paths to allow people that do have those ground floor units to get into the circulation areas. So that happens along Road D as well, where we're creating boulder retaining walls so that these units here actually look up and over and are drawn along to have a level crossing out to the MUP. There's a floor grade change that happens here, and we're just looking at having some rock stack walls against the core so that it's not in front of someone's unit, and then we allow people to walk out at the low end and also the high end of that transition. The entry to the building has a level entry here, and that relates to the MUP and the desire lines. There's also an entry straight on, which is a little bit steeper and has to work with the grades. And then for the commercial space, there's a direct entry that happens there. So universal access can be gained through the other end of the patio, but it's something that's just integrated into the design rather than an afterthought. These sections just illustrate the couple of conditions that we're dealing with along the multi-use path, where we do have the swale that separates the public realm from the private realm and gives a little bit of privacy. And we're trying to have a natural feel to this edge here and just a quick little access path to bring people out to the level crossing that I was showing. Now here's a little section showing the area where you would have the open lawn area that overlooks and is connected with the amenity area. And then a little bit of a dry stream bed that would surround a play area. And we're still working out exactly what equipment, as AP2 already does have a play structure there as well. Moving up the building, there are some green roofs that are contemplated with just an alternating pattern of different seating varieties. And the plant material, we're looking at combining this phase and AP3 as just an overall picture, but it utilizes a lot of native, evergreen, and seasonal interest planting to dominate the palette with lower trees so that we're not getting in the way of views. I'll flip over to AP4, and again, we do have a level access, which relates to the bikes and also the general circulation toward the lobby. The amenity space happens off of there, and then there's flow out into an exterior amenity space here, at which point there's a pathway that links the site. We're trying to have it feel like it's a meandering pathway through a couple of lawn areas to give some passive amenity there with a couple of picnic tables for the use of everyone. As we get towards the east or the drawing east end of the site, we end up just not being able to reconcile the grades. And so we do have some stairs that transition the story difference between. But again, for these units, we're able to have level access out to the sidewalk, the multi-use path. We have a similar strategy with the swale. And then when we start getting into these patios here, as opposed to really cramming them and tightening them up, we've had it so that we push the wall out and then just channelize the stream underneath into a culvert. So you still get that natural feel. And then again, you have a nice natural edge to the multi-use path. And where we do want to, again, demonstrate that natural feel and expose the swale, we'll have it feel as though it's bridges coming up into that main entry there. Again, we'll put green roofs in a couple of limited locations. And the plant palette is very similar to what we did on the previous one. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm looking forward to the panel's comments.
Great, thank you very much. So questions from the panel? And maybe we'll start over in the district room. Do we have anyone on panel asking questions in the district room?
Sure. If you're calling on the room first, I'll jump in. Just a couple quick questions to start off. So tenure of both these buildings, market condo. The tenure of the two of these buildings, both market condo. Okay, great. Sorry, I always ask the question just because it helps me kind of conceptualize the lens of level of design and so forth. So I appreciate the clarification there. And then a bit of a random one, but for the two bike parking stalls, providing one in the parkade and one in the unit. You said, so what does the one look like in the unit? Just out of curiosity, if you've got.
So the one in the unit, there's we didn't unfortunately show the unit plans, but there's I guess like a flex room, and it will be once again, a bike store that would be up on the back wheel. There's probably actually adequate room for 2, if not 3 plus skis.
Awesome. So like interior, kind of the provision of interior storage was a driving factor in the unit designs. Great. And then again, just kind of out of curiosity and maybe outside of the purview of this, but like any special treatment given to the elevator or interior corridors for people moving bikes in and out, or just maybe that's further down the line. And if it is, don't even worry about answering.
Yeah, that's probably a bit further down the line.
That's it. Thanks.
Great. So, sorry, my understand, John?
Are you calling on me to ask questions? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
It looks so good. I see some big improvements from when we looked at these buildings previously. Maybe one question for clarification. I thought I noticed on the plans that one building is market and condo and one is rental. Did I get that right?
Those are for the first 2 apartment buildings that are already under construction. I
totally misread this whole thing. Okay, never mind. They look great. No further questions.
All right, Sarah?
Hang on, let me just open up questions. Okay, so on AP3, the grade for let me just get to the right slide here. The grade for the accessible path that goes on the west side of the building goes between 8.3% to 5%. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So you don't have any level landings on that pathway?
I believe there was a provision of a level landing at the bottom and top. I'll have to confirm that. It was certainly a challenging, just taking one end to the other and making it work with level landings and other things, but I'll confirm that that is the case.
Can you tell me what's the width of that pathway?
I believe it was 5 feet.
Okay. And then beneath the pergola is a picnic table. Has it got fixed benches on it, or are they movable benches?
That was just shown for context, and we still have to work with the marketing and interior design to really pick furniture for underneath that trellis. It's really just a home for those things.
Okay, and are those benches or picnic tables that are sort of adjacent to the Pocket Park playground on the grassy area?
It is.
They're benches with backs, or they are benches that are open on both sides?
That hasn't been fixed at this point, but certainly we're open to steering it in one direction or another.
Okay. And then the end of the trip facility is for the commercial space at the south end of the building. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then what's going to be included in that end of trip facility?
That's noted in the zoning bylaw. I believe there has to be a sink, a shower, and do you have to have a toilet as well? Yes. So all of those things, but I don't know the specifics. They do live in section 41.11 of the zoning bylaw though. Or so, oh, sorry, 4.44, mixing it up with parking.
Okay. And then in the storage, where the storage lockers are, what's the width? Is there a turning radius in between those lockers?
We'll have to confirm that.
Okay. That's all my questions right now. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Sarah. I want to get the spelling, your pronunciation right. It's Sunny or Sunny?
Sorry, Charles, I only did one building. I missed the other building.
Oh, well, do you have more questions then?
I do. My apologize, Suni. Okay. Yes. So for AP4, what's the remaining available space between where the parked bikes are going to be and the east edge of the paving at the northeast corner of the building that goes towards the main entrance?
That area hasn't yet been fully developed, so I'll have to come back to you on that.
Okay. And then I just wanted to verify that the access to where the tables are under that pergola, that the only accessible route would be through the amenity space?
At this stage, that's my understanding. Yeah.
Okay. But it is an at-grade, it will be an at-grade entrance, because the rendering just shows a step, but I know renderings can be a little bit misleading.
Yeah, my understanding was that the two patios were at the same elevation.
Okay.
Yeah, we should be able to provide a level threshold for that transition.
Super. Okay, those are all my questions. Thank you. Sorry for jumping back in.
Right, we want to be thorough. So, Suni.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions on, is the pathway on the west side of AP4 accessible?
By pathway, do you mean the sidewalk on Solar Way?
Yeah, the one between the townhouses and the building.
Well, the one between the townhouses and the building is at the upper level. So to get to it, there is a set of stairs, but if you come off the amenity room, it is flush. And then the intent was to have that under a 5% slope.
Okay. No, the other question is about local art. Like, are you including any local art in the project or in the two buildings?
In one of the previous stages, we're providing local art, so we figured that was a part of it. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Great, thank you. So, Mia.
Hi, thank you for the presentation, everyone. I was wondering if there was a tree management plan available and if it's something that I just missed in the package or if that was something that was circulated.
No, that would not have been circulated as part of this development permit application, just the landscaping plan.
And then, so I saw something about a tree being retained on site, perhaps at staff request in some of the documentation. And I was wondering if there was any history on that to share.
Well, I'm not familiar with that tree, but so this site went through a development permit for protection of the environment for the entire site where it was subdivided. I think part of the confusion with the site plan is that it has now been subdivided. So those two parcels at the lower end or the west side of Finch Drive are where those two previous apartment buildings are located. And then this upper site has townhouses, duplexes, and the two apartment buildings that are being presented to you today. There is a significant amount of trees that are being retained below the townhouses to the west of this. But I am not aware of any trees that were required to be retained in this portion of the site.
Okay, great. Thank you for the clarification there. A quick question about the bike furniture that's being proposed here. So I see that in the materials package for the landscape, it says that you're using these high-low racks, and I just wanted to double check that that's the case, or if they are like single standalone racks.
Well, the high-low is a single standalone rack.
It is? Okay.
Yeah, and it will be a low rack. It was changed. High-low was something that had a little loop off the side of it. It's just a 45-degree angle stainless steel loop. And the high allowed you to put a bike tire on it and space them closer. We don't really have any intent to do that. We just want to have them far enough apart so that you can park two bikes and treat them like a typical standalone rack.
Okay, great. And then this is just out of curiosity, really. I saw something about the potential for solar power generation and wondered if there's more context around that somebody could provide.
I can speak to that. We're still evaluating the potential for solar on the rooftops with the client, but we haven't committed to anything at this time.
Okay, thank you. That's all from me.
Great. I don't really have any questions or maybe just comment that not having the unit plans in there, I think is it's not great, but we typically aren't going to have a lot of discussions about the internal layout of those units with the panel. But I do find I'm struggling a little bit to really understand the relationship of these buildings to their neighbors in the same development, because they really, those site cross sections have really kind of been omitted from this package. And I'm just having trouble visualizing what what these spaces between the townhomes and the apartment building are going to feel like. It's just it's not so much a question as the fact that I can't really ask any questions about it because I don't have the information. Did anyone else have questions, clarifications?
Yeah, sorry. I actually, as was listening to everybody else, I have two more quick ones, both I guess related to unit size and mix. So first question, and maybe it's best for Bryan to answer, but I'm assuming that site-wide, the master plan's meeting 20% 3 bedrooms. But I noticed on the these individual buildings are not. So is that 20% being met on aggregate?
That's correct.
Okay, perfect, easy. And then second question, unit sizes, like just looking at average unit sizes throughout the two buildings, like they're skewing larger than I would typically be used to. And just out of curiosity, like a bit hard to conceptualize without unit plans, but totally fine that that's typically outside the purview of the panel. But is that a market driven decision? Is that based on site layout or a combination of both?
It's a combination of both, plus a client driven as well.
That's it. Thanks for letting me jump in again.
Okay, great. So having asked the questions and got our clarifications, we'll typically just invite the the panelists now, and we'll go in the same order again to comment. So we'll go back to.
Perfect, right back. Just gonna pull up the, sorry, just bear with me one sec. I had plans up. I'm just gonna pull up the staff report and try to speak to each section. Site plan, I don't have any additional comments. Like, I completely understand you're fighting the grades, and I think that it's done a really considered job of addressing them. And it's, yeah, I mean, for me, it took embarrassingly quite a while to wrap my head around how it was all working. But once it clicked, yeah, I think, like I said, I think it's a considered approach in making the best of a challenging situation with, you know, bearing storage in the hill and so forth. So I thought that was great. Architectural design and building materials, overall, like very positive response for me. Like, I think just harkening back to the previous buildings that the panel saw, there's enough cohesion, but also enough variation throughout. And, you know, I think that, yeah, they're you know, cementitious panels are what they are, but then with the glue lam and the wood accents and so forth, there's enough variation to add visual interest and sort of break up the overall cementitious panel and use the colors and so forth. I thought, again, really well considered and well executed. And yeah, landscape plan, again, I think I understand that the grades are challenging, but you know, incorporation of the strata park and MUP and so forth. Yeah, I thought that the design team made the most of a tricky situation. So overall, really positive response, and kind of, yeah, no additional comments other than that for me.
Great. Thank you. I think John, you were next, right?
Thanks, Charles. I don't have much to add. I think that these buildings look good. They're a significant improvement over the two at the bottom of the hill, I think. I'll, you know, commend the team for doing, you know, establishing some good site planning, nice landscaping, I think quite reasonable outdoor areas with that challenging topography, working with the constraints. I do think that one of the buildings should be rental, but that's just my opinion. So I think that would have been nice if it mirrored the situation at the bottom of the hill. But yeah, otherwise I'm pretty satisfied with what they've done here.
Great, thank you. Sarah?
Okay, let me just open up my thing here. Okay, so for AP3, I know that it's challenging with the grade changes, but that ramp at the back should have some rest areas. CSA recommends that there's flat rest space every 12 meters. Additionally, you might even achieve that by having some little pullouts that are flat so people can just stop and rest. Make sure that the pathway is wide enough, meaning CSA B651 requirements, which I think is 1800 millimeters. Additionally, you might want to have a bench in a pullout section. One of the latest reports that I read about seniors is that, you know, some with health conditions can only walk a maximum of 30 meters. So that should be considered. The amenity space that's in the kitchenette for everybody, just to make sure that the appliances have controls at the front of the unit. I know that that's a small thing, but nobody wants to get burned. yeah, all of the pathways should meet the CSA B651, so that includes on AP4. If picnic tables are offered, make sure that both ends have an extension on so that there can be wheelchair access. And I would further go to encourage you not to have fixed benches, or if there are fixed benches, that they are open at either end so that it would allow people to access without having to lift their legs. The benches that are in the pocket park shouldn't have backs on, so you can view either way. And there should also be some wheelchair accessible hard space for a wheelchair to go adjacent to at least one of those benches. So again, look to CSA B651 for those requirements. And then on AP4, I would encourage you to try and extend the parking area to allow to have an accessible visitor parking space there for overheight vehicles. Because otherwise I would never be able to visit these buildings. The picnic tables that are at the back of the building on the west side, I would encourage you to have some hardscaping to at least one of them and have it be accessible. And make sure that the access from the amenity space is at grade, and that if sliding doors are going to be utilized, that the track is recessed into the floor. And then to, maybe encourage you to increase the number of adaptable units. You've got 7, and then you've got 4 accessible parking spaces. So you may also need to look at increasing your accessible parking if you have enough people taking those adaptable units. And then also just to make sure that the washrooms in those adaptable units are going to be usable, so that the doors are not swinging into the space, prior to the adaptation, so that they at least will be visitable. And I think that that's all of my comments. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, I love the look of the building. I mean, I can't really comment on any of the units because, again, we can't see them, but yeah, I think that it's there's some good efforts that being made. So thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Sarah. Sue.
Well, yeah, thank you for the presentation. I find very positive how the massing steps with landscape to reduce height, and the materials are closely related to the surroundings. I find the 2 buildings have cohesive look throughout the development. The pedestrian path interconnect throughout the project, which is great, and also with the existing trails. Yeah, overall, a very positive response. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mia.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, so acknowledging that the grading approach was certainly challenging here. It looks like a nice solution. And just to reiterate Sarah's comment around the resting areas, I think, given that it's there's so much grade change here, that having those rest areas would be really great to see. Another comment would be that it's possible that it's already considered here, but to ensure that the individual bike space, or bike rack spacing can accommodate a bike on both sides. I think they look like maybe they're spaced at 24 inches, but something a little bit more generous might be more comfortable. And then I would also comment that that it would be a nice consideration to integrate trees that are less of like the ornamental sort of landscape scale, and have maybe some varieties that have a more significant mature canopy size, just to sort of speak to the architecture a little bit more in the wider context while also preserving those views. So having conifers as well and larger tree species would be something that would be nice to see. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I think I'm echoing the comments of most of the panel. It's a nice looking building. It's got nice proportion, nice kind of texture, sense of scale. eh, I do have, like I said earlier, difficulty getting a sense of the feel of how these spaces between the buildings are going to, what they're going to be like, both because of the grade change and the difference in scale between the apartment buildings and the townhomes, and what looks in plan at least to be kind of relatively tight spacing between these buildings. And if we look at the 3D rendering, there's quite a generous amount of room between the road and the buildings, and this all goes to um, the because of the grades and the typologies of these buildings. It's a very unusual situation. We have this is very much a kind of a suburban context. And typically, when you have more of an urban center and you move away from that urban center into more and more kind of a suburban condition and up the slopes, as we have in lots of places on the North Shore, you're typically moving into lower and lower density housing. And here, what we have is this fairly high density type development being pushed up the hill. And I think that this project is actually kind of a good example of how that can be made to work. This looks like it's going to be quite a nice place, an enjoyable, high quality of place to live in. So, commendations to the design team on handling this unusual situation, and I think in a fairly detailed way. Sarah, you have your hand up.
Yes, sir. I just missed 2 comments, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to interrupt your providing comment. Is it okay to do that now?
Yes, please.
I just wanted to make sure that in AP3 that the end of trip facility has an accessible shower, and also to ensure that the turning radius in the locker space is 1800 millimeters. That's all my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah. Sorry, it just your comment about the end of trip facility. It automatically made me realize that one of the things I find, what I wonder about this development in general is whether it wouldn't have been interesting or recommendable to have a small local sort of convenience retail for the development, because it's large enough, that now people really are, they're needing to get into their cars to go all the way down to town to grab small necessities like I need the vitamins, whatever, right? And end of trip facilities typically are business oriented. They're for employees, and change and get dressed and get for work because they've commuted to work. They're typically not necessary or provided in residential developments because you're home at that point, right? Yeah. So did anyone else have comments that they want to add? I think we can have a quick discussion then as a panel about what our recommendation is going to be. Did anyone want to put forward a motion? No?
Sorry, we need a motion to make our recommendations.
Yes. We have our usual list, I believe, of A, B, and C options.
Sure, I'll make the motion. I thought that we made the motion after we had determined what those recommendations were going to be, or somebody had captured them and read them back to us.
Well, depending on the movement, yes. Do we have that? Do we have a summary of the comments?
Charles, historically, ADP will make the motion and the comments will follow when ADP determines a motion, I believe.
Right. So if we're voting on our typical A recommendation, which is we're happy with this as is, and vote it through, we can have then we wouldn't require a list of comments if we go with the typical or B option, which is, work on the following comments with district staff. Then we would need that summary. And
I'll make recommendation B.
B.
I put a motion.
Have someone second that? Great, Neil seconds. Great, thank you. So, do we have a summary of our actionable items in the comments that we need staff to work on with the proponent?
Could I make a suggestion? Because I have fairly detailed notes that
Right.
for ease of going through all of the comments, what I heard was the majority of the comments were related to accessibility requirements, particularly related to the ramps and access to the amenity areas, as well as in the end of trip facilities and the storage lockers. But I won't get into those I did get the technical details down, but I'll leave it at that to try and keep it succinct.
And also the site furnishings. I just wanted to add. There was some great comments.
I agree. That does seem to be the bulk of the actionable specific comments. So
Okay.
are we happy having recommendation B with those items as just described being our recommendation?
Yes.
Yes. Great. So let's have a vote on it. All who are in favor, say aye. Great. Is anyone opposing? Please voice. Have your sound on if you're objecting. No, we have no one objecting. So that's unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Emma, for your comments.
All right, so thank you very much to the proponents. And I'm going to return. I'm going to return control of this meeting then.
Thanks, Charles. I'll hand in the baton over there. And I think the next item in the business, the third item, which is the ADP Bylaw update for DPA3 Guideline review. I'm going to pass this over to Philip Gibbins, planner of District of Squamish. He's just setting up here, so if you can just give us a couple of minutes, you can maybe take some time for recess, and then we'll come back. Is that okay with the panel? Yeah. So just going to do a 5-minute recess. Yeah, so we'll start off with the ADP bylaw update, DPA3 guideline review with Philip Gibbins.
Thank you. I'll just get this loaded up. Cool. Yeah, good afternoon, Philip Gibbins, planner. And today I'll just be giving a presentation on proposed updates to the ADP bylaw and also the DPA3 guidelines. And these form part of the district's Housing Accelerator Fund commitments. So Squamish Housing Action Plan new this year has actions to advance district housing policy, which are planned to be implemented over the next 3 or so years. And these have been developed to address the need for new housing units outlined in the district's Housing Needs Report, completed last year, and the need to respond to new housing legislation announced by the province in 2023 and 24. And there are a number of actions which require updates primarily to zoning to permit additional density. And the third item is the commitments made to CMHC in relation to the Housing Accelerator Fund. So the district made an application which was approved and outlined a number of initiatives it would undertake to increase housing supply over the next 3 or so years. And some of these items are relevant to ADP, which is why we're here. Project information. So action 3 of the action plan is Missing Middle Housing Accelerator. And this includes proposed updates to the ADP bylaw, those being to no longer require ADP review for multi-unit dwellings for up to 6 units and not requiring ADPU for multi-unit dwellings between 6 and 20 units, but there'd be discretion for staff to refer an application to ADP where they feel that there's non-adherence to the guidelines. And action 6 is to revise and streamline development permitting, and this includes 2 initiatives relevant to ADP, and these are amending the OCP to remove DP requirements for triplexes and fourplexes, and streamlining the DPA3 guidelines. So for this, staff have undertaken a review of the guidelines and are proposing a number of changes, which deleting redundant guidelines which no longer reflect current policy, are ineffective or are duplicated, either in other DPA guidelines or addressed by other regulation. Some of the guidelines have been moved to other more appropriate locations, such as zoning bylaw or the development application checklist. Some guidelines contain requirements for types and standards of information staff require for review of applications, and and then there's items best regulated through the zoning bylaw. So additionally, we've tried to clarify the intent of existing guidelines, and that's in the hope to reduce the number of revisions required after application submission. We've added some new guidelines where there was identified policy gap, and we've also, as I mentioned, we'll be amending the zoning bylaw and the development information checklist. The timeline for this, so we're going next week, May 21st, presented to council for feedback, and there'll be targeted engagement with the development community in coming weeks. We're going to wrap all that feedback up, and July bylaws will be presented to council for readings and a public hearing and third reading and adoption in the fall. So staff are requesting feedback from ADP, particularly on the following items. The deletion of the energy efficiency guidelines, the color guideline, and any guidelines that require further clarification or don't make sense, and any identified gaps in regulation resulting from the changes, or any other critical misses or red flags. Thank you.
Are we looking for feedback from the panel at the moment?
Sorry, Charles, say that again.
So the previous slide involved feedback. Are we saying that we're looking for feedback from the panel at the moment, or at some specific later date?
We're looking for feedback today. I think the best way to probably do it to facilitate clear comments and guidance from ADP would be to probably stick to our usual. So maybe we could do a round of questions, and then we'll follow up that with a round of comments. I think maybe panel members should speak to specifically to maybe a comment specific to DPA3 and nothing out of the ordinary. Otherwise, we might get off on the beaten path of it. And just checking with all of the panel members, everyone had a chance to review the attachment that Jesse sent to everyone in the email. Is there any, does anyone need a minute just to have a quick look over them, or are we good to jump straight into this?
Good to go.
Everyone's good to go? Okay, great. I'll start with you then, Charles. We'll just go around and do a round of questions first.
Okay. I'm just wondering, aside from these housing policy incentives or directives, or were there any other motivators to some of the proposed changes in these guidelines?
Yeah, so the main reason for starting the project is to for streamlining the guidelines through for these housing initiatives. But when you open up the can of worms, that is a project such as reviewing the DPA3 guidelines, we took the opportunity to add in some additional changes or new guidelines that we thought were missing, which had been identified by staff and council over time.
Great, that was my only question.
Thanks, Charles. Sarah, any questions from you, please?
Yeah. So can you tell me how you got to the number of up to 20 for not requiring ADP review? Like it seemed quite a jump from 6 to 20 that there doesn't require any review.
This aligns with the delegation requirements for DPs. So we aligned those numbers. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Sarah, just to jump in there to add a bit of clarity, anything between 6 and 20 that didn't align overall with the DPA3 guidelines would still be referred to ADP, but if they are in alignment with the DPA3 guidelines, they would not immediately require ADP review.
But are you not changing those DPA guidelines?
We are changing the guidelines, yes, but if they were not in alignment with them, they would still need ADP review.
Okay. Thanks.
Is that everything for you, Sarah?
Yeah, the rest is comments, but we're just doing questions right now, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mio, any questions from you?
No questions from me, thank you.
Okay, I'll jump then to you, John.
No questions. I have a few comments, but I'll save them for the next round.
Okay, and do we just have one panel member remaining? Apologies, the subtitles here are covering the name, and that's the first time I've met you at panel. Suni?
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question, but is this the questions for the guidelines review?
Yeah, the questions for the proposed changes that were attached in the email. So it's the DPA3 guidelines. There are revisions to them.
Yeah, no, I don't have any questions.
Okay. We'll jump straight into comments because I also don't have any questions. So I'll go back to you, Charles. I apologize. Sorry. I just completely missed Lucas. He's sat right next to me. I'm just that used to seeing things online. Sorry, Lucas.
I'm good. Thanks.
I'm so sorry. Okay, he's got no questions. So back to you, John. Charles.
Okay, great. I think I've made it clear in my deliberations in the past with this, this panel. I'm as an architect, somewhat of a skeptic of the real value of design guidelines, especially where they have to do with aesthetics specifically. I think they largely serve the purpose of actually promoting a kind of sameness or blandness of a kind of a majority rules idea of what buildings should look like, and I think that they're ultimately they do very little to actually improve the quality of designs. So I would highly recommend that the guidelines remain mainly technical, having to do with setbacks, heights, volume, and stay away altogether from issues of design aesthetics, pushing materials or colors. Because again, I think they mainly serve the purpose of satisfying the need for the general public to not be offended by things. And so if you want good architecture, you want good design, leave it in the hands of the people who are actually doing the work and providing the buildings.
Thanks, Charles. Sarah, any the comments from you?
Yeah, my comments are really around, like, when I looked at the housing needs report and then back to the OCP, is that there's not really clear definitions, and they're often interchangeably being used. Is accessible housing versus adaptable housing versus universally designed housing versus special needs housing versus just adaptable housing. So I think there needs to be some real clarity there, and they're not interchangeable. They're all different typologies, right? CMHC has universally designed housing, but it doesn't really clearly state that the bathrooms have to be a particular size. So then it defaults to adaptable housing standards, which may or may not work if they're not adapted for somebody to live in them with accessible needs. The housing needs report also doesn't identify, like, people with disabilities. It's either seniors housing, and special needs housing is almost exclusively for people who have addiction issues and need more supportive housing, which again is a different typology. And special needs housing could actually be accessible housing that's defined in that way. And then just to add a little bit more mud to the mud soup is that in the OCP, it says 10% visitable housing with accessible washrooms. So what does that look like? Right? So an accessible washroom, you know, is larger than an adaptable housing unit's washroom. So again, there's a lack of clarity there that I think really needs to be defined more in what's going forward, and you know, and not interchangeably used. I think that decision makers, particularly council, don't understand necessarily the difference between adaptable and accessible. Adaptable still needs to be adapted to meet the needs of somebody who has accessibility needs. So that should be clarified better, and you know, to default also to the requirements of CMHC. They are actually doing a terrible job of supporting accessible housing right now, even though they have some defined targets. They're not actually reporting on it. So they just have these, you know, large numbers in their last report. It's not, they're not reporting on like, well, how many accessible units did you actually build? It's just, we've got these targets for seniors and we've got these targets for people with developmental disabilities who may or may not have mobility disabilities. So again, just to use caution with CMHC, because I don't think that they are, their requirements are necessarily being met. And what I've just discovered about BC Housing is that they, you know, for instance, they can be a lender and not then be overseeing the project to ensure that their accessible requirements are being met. So again, it depends on what that partnership looks like in order to meet those requirements. So some definition is required, and accessible housing is needed, and it's not the same as aging in place, which you know, of course,
Something went
is
wrong.
being adapted.
Please try again.
Oh gosh, sorry. That's all my comments. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. That's moving on to Mio.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I suppose I am not an expert in this topic, so I'll admit to that upfront. But I suppose any sort of I get how do I say it? Like, I appreciate that there's discretionary referral capabilities from what I understand from this document, because I think our role is really to kind of help both staff and decision makers with sort of how to look at these developments. And as long as we can remain in service to do that at a discretionary level, once that's triggered, I'm not too sure about the details of that. That's great. And if it facilitates more housing, then also supportive of that. But yeah, I'm sorry that I don't have more robust comments around that. But yeah, thanks. That's it.
Thanks for your input, Mio. John.
Thanks, Luke. So generally, I think that this initiative looks good. I'm supportive of it. I think that streamlining what types of projects are brought to ADP makes sense. I had two specific comments. One, they're both fairly minor, but I'll just mention them. So first off, right off the top, the guidelines suggest that metal is a distinct Squamish element, and I just think maybe there should be, if that's the case, there should be a little context given for how metal is a distinct Squamish element, or what that means. And then the other one is this idea of removing certain guidelines that are covered in the zoning bylaw. And I think in a few cases, it might make sense to keep them in the guidelines because of the context that's provided. And I'm thinking particularly about bike racks, where the guidelines currently suggest that bike racks should be located where there's good visibility, access, lighting and your building entrances. And I didn't take the time to look at the zoning bylaw, but unless that context about like where bike racks should be located is included in the zoning bylaw, it might be worth going through the list of guidelines that you're removing and making sure that that context isn't lost, even if it means some duplication. It might be worth keeping it in. Those are my only comments. Otherwise, I commend the effort.
Thanks, John. Some great points there. To you, Lucas.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll state the obvious. Like, I occupy the UDI seat on the panel, so sort of viewing this from the lens of the development industry, and I think overall, the initiative to kind of streamline the projects that come in front of ADP and allow some discretion to staff is a commendable effort, and obviously in line with the funding from the CMHC Housing Accelerator Fund and some of the provincial initiatives and so forth. So generally really supportive of that. In terms of kind of the edits and streamline to the overall DPA3, I think you're specifically asking for identifying guidelines that require further clarification or don't make sense. I didn't have any specific comments on the guidelines or guidelines that don't make sense. Sorry. But I think that, holistically, the edits make sense to me on my read and specifically, some of the, I'm just trying to find some of the notes that I made, but some of the clarifications on building form, massing, and variation, I think are going to go a long way, particularly around like removing a kind of prescriptive requirement to step buildings back at upper floor massing, which is not always in concert with the step code, and then I think the encouragement of CRL shapes, which add a lot of envelope, add a lot of expense, add a lot of overall building efficiency. To remove that requirement, I think are going to be really, really solid moves. And again, some of the redundancy around energy efficiency, removing that, we're all familiar with the step code that's regulating the overall energy efficiency of the building. So I think that, yeah, generally, overall really, really solid moves. And if it's I admittedly kind of walked through all of these today, but if it's helpful, I'm happy to do a more comprehensive view and follow up with comments by email or what have you, if that's allowed. If this is the only platform, then that's fine too. But that's kind of the extent of my comments.
Thanks, Lucas. And Suni, please.
Yeah, in terms of all the changes, I think on the guidelines, it makes sense to me. The fact that you like the guidelines is mentioning all the different guidelines that state and different than the DP3, the zoning bylaw, development bylaw, accessible streetscape guidelines, or energy step code. It is really clear to me. So yeah, I don't have any more comments. I think they're very concise and clear.
Thank you. Okay, I'll follow up with my comments. Yeah, I echo a lot of the panel members' comments on that. I think there's some really good work from removing some redundancies and streamlining these guidelines, especially when they're located elsewhere. My concerns would be any kind of errors or not errors, sorry, omissions, or like I'll be mindful of any gaps that maybe be created between the DPA or the removal from a DPA and particular bylaws. Like for example, yeah, I'd support Sarah in her concern for accessibility. There's a lot of changes coming in the new 2025 building code, but if projects such as 3-unit developments to 20 aren't coming in front of ADP, but they're also removed from these DPA guidelines, like what are these going to look like accessibility wise? Like how are you going to help these be held to? And we make sure that these developments are providing adaptable units, and they're not actually going to be required in the 2025 code to provide adaptable units within townhomes. So it's one thing to be mindful of. Obviously, we're aware living in Squamish, the FCL, it's not very easy to have an adaptable or indeed an accessible townhome. It's very tricky, but it's definitely something that a product that should be available for everybody. I'd also echo Charles's comments about the removal of the stepping requirements for the massing. I think that, yeah, it allows more flexibility for designs, especially in the downtown area where these sites are quite small and it is tricky to meet the developers' demands as well as all of the other constraints that we're working with. And I look forward to seeing some hopefully better developed designs, because ultimately it really is down to us as designers and architects to provide these solutions. Yeah, that'll be my comments. I guess I'll just ask staff, is there any other particular feedback you would like from ADP that's outstanding at this point?
No, I think to what Lucas was speaking to before, we are following this up with a focused engagement with some developers and architects. We would love further feedback if you had the time or capacity on specific guidelines. This all gets presented to council at committee next week, I believe, and then will be brought forward for readings in July, it's anticipated. So there's some time there to work things and adjust as needed based on council feedback and ADP and then the developer architecture community. So we appreciate any feedback you have.
Thanks, Jesse. Does any of the panel members have any comments or response for Jesse there? Nothing really needed right now. I'm just checking in if anyone's got any more comments. Nope. Okay, thanks. So that'll be conclude the last item of business. The only sorry, just 1 second. Yeah, this is the next bit. Just any roundtable discussion. I'll just open the floor for anyone who wants to bring anything to the table. Nothing. I'll just speak to one thing, and that is a point that Charles came up on during the last the item 2 during the development permit, and that was the lack of context within the presenter's site sections. I would agree that I don't think that the unit plans were necessary. However, seeing site sections in context is one thing that is continually missed off applications during this ADP review, and it does make it particularly hard and tricky to understand the context of the surrounding developments. And it's one thing that I think we should hopefully look for in packages moving forwards. Would anyone like to add anything to that?
No, I think I just echo. I'm not sure if it's within the purview of the panel to specifically, get into the granularity of unit plans, more design character, obviously, but I find it hard to just see square footage and a unit mix without visualizing. It's hard to kind of comment on the exterior orientation of the building without seeing the interior layouts of the unit. So yeah, even if they're sample unit plans, because you don't need to lay out every single plan, but if there's sample plans, it could be blown up for context as a requirement. I think that would be helpful.
Thanks, Lucas. Yeah, if there are no other items anyone wants to bring to the table, we can now close this meeting and yeah, I'll basically take a motion to close the meeting. That's first Charles and seconded by Sarah. Thank you. Thank you all for your time and all of your comments.
Thanks, guys.